All right. So why don't we just start moving along? Can we move over to the next slide? All right, this is our icebreaker. Please throw it in the chat. Next slide. So today, what we're going to be talking about is the Community Change Grant and how we might be working together in a smarter way, a smarter, not harder way. I think we all are busy folks, and there is definitely opportunity for collaboration and for making this work a little bit easier as we're applying for the Community Change Grant. We're going to start with our introductions icebreaker, which we just did, and we're going to talk a little bit about grounding the work. We're going to provide a brief recap of the Community Change Grant, because I know it's been a little bit of a time since we talked last. Provide a brief overview of the free support options, and then we're going to dive into one application and what that would look like and flush those details out. And we're going to be doing a lot more Q&A, hopefully, in this session than we did in the last one. So folks could ask questions, and I'll be here to answer them. Next slide. So I am Joan Cato. I'm the Colaborativo 40 director here at GreenLatinos. I have about 20 years of experience in community engagement. I recently helped GreenLatinos get a $25 million USDA urban forestry grant. And I've worked on tons of government grants and have gotten approximately $500 million in government grants through different types of proposals. And there's a QR code if you want to connect with me via LinkedIn. Feel free to do that. Next slide. So why is this money available with the Community Change Grant and all this federal government opportunities, right? Because this is kind of a new advent during this administration compared to previous ones. Well, it's because of Justice 40. It's Justice 40's initiative from the federal government that was created during the Biden administration that says that 40% of government investment should go to benefit historically disadvantaged communities, those that are marginalized, underserved, overburdened by pollution. So that's a lot of the communities that you and I interact with on a daily basis. And it's something that will probably, quite frankly, go away in the next administration. We saw when the Republicans took control of the House of Representatives, one of the first programs that they tried to cut was the IRA funding, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and the American Rescue Plan. So my point being is that if we don't act now, this money will probably not be available after 2024 if there's a new administration, or if there's a new folks that control the House of Representatives and Congress. So this is a once, I think, in a lifetime opportunity. It's a historic investment in trying to combat pollution, trying to combat climate change, really taking an invested interest in trying to create new green technologies, green energy, and making things overall more efficient and better for the environment. Like I mentioned, Justice 40, the way it's being implemented is through the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and the American Rescue Plan. And Justice 40 money is available through 15 different agencies within the U.S. federal government. It's showing up in places that may not be immediately obvious. So it's not just with the EPA. It's showing up in places like the USDA, Department of Commerce, NASA even. And that's really historic and really cool that all these agencies have made this commitment that 40% of federal grant dollars will be spent in a way that values and is trying to benefit our communities. And notice I say benefit and not go to, so it's up to us to apply for these grants and make sure that they do go to benefit our communities. Next slide. the Community Change Grant. So the Community Change Grant, we're going to talk a little bit more and review about the basics. It's a $2 billion grant. And it has to be spent within 3 years. Who can apply is 2 community-based organizations or 1 CBO and a federal tribe, a local government, or a higher education institution. The thing that's really unique about this grant is that community-based organizations are going to be taking the lead as far as federal government funding and applying for the grant, and making sure that the proposals, the ideas really do affect the community. Because as you probably already know, federal grants tend to historically benefit and are historically more inclined to go to municipalities and higher education institutions. And CBOs are oftentimes the secondary or playing catch up and telling the federal government about why this is not necessarily the most effective way to reach our communities. So this is a historic opportunity for us to take the lead. And the cool thing to also know is that if your CBO does not have a sam.gov number or a CAGE number, then they don't have to be necessarily the lead applicant, but a CBO has to be on each application. So that means that CBOs that may not have that kind of that status right now, which you can get probably in about a month to 6 weeks, through going through sam.gov and just applying for your number. It's a free number. It saves you some of that hassle and some of that time, so you could be one of the first applicants for this grant. And in order to apply, you have to go ahead and create a statutory partnership between these 2 types of organizations. And that's pretty much like an MOU that talks about how you're going to be interacting over the term of the grant. Like I said, it's 3 years. The applications and the proposals are going to be accepted on a rolling basis, but the application deadline is November 21st in 2024. I think folks can maybe remember going to college and having a rolling admission type process. So that means that the earlier we apply, the greater likelihood that we would actually get these kind of federal grant dollars in relation to the Community Change Grant. So it's incumbent on us to be one of the first applicants or to apply earlier on in the process, because that increases our likelihood of actually getting the grant. Next slide. So what is a community-based organization? Because it's not necessarily as obvious with this grant compared to other types of federal grant proposals. So you have to be a nonprofit, that means tax exempt. You have to support the community and populations through community engagement, education, or other types of related services. You have to have a focus on one particular or a particular geographic area or by relationships. So this kind of local type presence is something that is unique to being a CBO according to the Community Change Grant. So that local presence is very much emphasized. So they're not necessarily looking for a national organization that has a national reach. In your app, you could be a national organization, but you have to have that local presence and that local type of relationship with folks on the ground, so you can actually talk about how it's going to benefit the community and have that more one-to-one local type frontline interaction. And then finally, organizations must have a geographic presence relationship with folks on the ground. Next slide. What are disadvantaged communities? So obviously the federal government might have a different definition than we do for a disadvantaged community. They are actually using a specific map to talk about what is a disadvantaged community. So after this presentation, we're going to go ahead and send out this deck. you can go ahead and click on the map and figure out which communities that you want to work in and see, or that you're currently working in, and see if they fall within the disadvantaged communities map. My gut is that they will. So that'll be available. The other opportunity is, because that might not be like one community that's united, there are some exceptions, right? Because disadvantaged communities don't always just have a continuous street that connects them all, right? The other opportunities to think, or how the federal government is thinking about a disadvantaged community, includes farm worker communities, which obviously have no fixed address and are more of, or can be migrant type workers and work on a seasonal basis, and also disadvantaged unincorporated communities that are designated by the census. And these folks lack legally determined geographic boundaries. And this is more of a HUD, the Housing and Urban Development type of a definition when it comes to a disadvantaged community. So they're trying to be flexible as far as what counts as a disadvantaged community. It's not only people of color, it could be folks that might be low income, it could be folks in rural areas. They're really trying to have that type of a broad approach. Next slide. So the focus, can you go back one? The focus of the community change grant are these three type environmental issues. So climate resilience and adaptation, mitigating climate and health risks, especially as it relates to extreme heat, community-led air and other types of pollution monitoring, low and zero emission resilient technologies, workforce development and reduction of greenhouse gases and other pollutants, and reducing indoor toxins and air pollution. So these are the 6 main areas of focus for the community change grant. And if you want to apply for track 1, which is what we're gonna be talking about a little bit later, it behooves us to have multiple types of our proposal that hits multiple of these goals, several of these goals, and not just one. Next slide. So what's unique about this grant? I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier. It's a 2-track type of a grant. The first track is more community driven. It's going to be for approximately $9.6 billion, and it's going to fund approximately 150 projects at $10 to $20 million each. So this is the big one. And then track 2 is to provide meaningful engagement for equitable governance. And it's expected to be about $40 million to fund 20 projects at about $1 to $3 million each. Another thing that's unique is that there will be rolling applications. Like I mentioned earlier, the earlier we apply, the better off we are. That means they're anticipating, because I did ask about when they would be reviewing, they're hoping to review 1 time per month proposals that would be coming in. Another cool thing about this grant is that folks can reapply. So if they like your proposal, and maybe it just needs some slight modifications, they're going to give folks one opportunity to reapply, provided that you have a consultation with them. And so that's a really amazing opportunity, because that doesn't necessarily always exist within federal grants. And yes, the only thing that you have to remember is that you actually have to go to their listening session and get their feedback to reapply. Folks can apply for up to 2 different applications. And track 2 has a 2-phase evaluation process. The first phase will evaluate your written proposal, and then the second phase will have an oral interview. And yes, it'll be scored together, and you'll be able to kind of figure out what works for your organization as far as trying to have a good strategy for the 2, like I tell it, like a 2-step process. Next slide. For the purpose of this call and what we're going to be guiding most folks through, we're going to be focusing on track 1 because it's the bigger bang for our buck as far as what we're going to be looking at. So project types that would be considered in track 1 include infrastructure and implementation projects. Like I mentioned, it's $1.96 billion. They're looking to fund 150 projects at approximately $10 to $20 million each, and there will be an oral presentation. You can see the side-by-side comparison. So if you're interested in track 2, we won't be talking about it in this call, but it's going to be more geared towards advocacy projects, community engagement projects that help disadvantaged communities get involved with government processes. It's going to be for approximately $40 million. There will be 20 different projects and about $1 to $3 million each, and there will be no oral presentation. And the idea behind this is that the EPA wants to make this process less about the written proposal and more about the project itself, because they know that that kind of hinders a lot of community-based organizations from actually making it through the grant process. Next slide. Free support. Next slide. So there are a whole bunch of free type of opportunities to get us these federal grant dollars. And so the first one is offered through the Environmental Protection Network. They have a very basic template that's out there that also provides a step-by-step guide about how to apply. They even provide you a timeline so you can kind of use that as your basis as you're creating your grant. They have a checklist, they have a narrative template. It's you can fill it in with your organization. I'll go into the difference between that and what we'll be providing, but it's a good opportunity for folks who maybe aren't interested in the grant idea that we came up with and aren't interested in pursuing that kind of a grant focus or proposal focus. I would highly recommend the Environmental Protection Network. It's they even have a grant template and a step-by-step guide for track 2. And they have evaluation criteria, narrative template, budget template, all that kind of good stuff that you'll need to actually apply for the grant. Next slide. Option 2 would be getting free technical assistance from the EPA. So there's multiple ways to do this, right? There is one, the Community Change Grant Technical Assistance. You can fill out a form on the EPA's website. You can call an 800 number, or you can email them and ask for help about the Community Change Grant. Option 2 is the Community Change Grant Equitable Resilience Program. And this is primarily geared towards those organizations that would be submitting proposals and projects related more to disaster-prone areas. There is a request form, and an EPA representative will actually come out to your area, review the project location, and ideally talk with you one-on-one about what's going on and helping you shape your project. They're only going to have about 50 recipients for this, and obviously it'll be focused on disaster-prone areas. Next slide. And then the other opportunity for technical assistance that the EPA is providing is through their Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers. There are 9 regions from the EPA, and each region has a technical assistance center that is supposed to help you with everything through your application, or everything from your proposal except your application. So they can help you once you get the grants for some things such as your procurement policy, figuring out what kind of things you have to implement as your organization, but also as just trying to get a better idea of, does my project fall within a contiguous map? Because a contiguous map is a very a cartographer type language about what your map should look like when you're looking at your project area. Like I mentioned, there are 8 different regions. Region 1 and Region 8 recently just, I think, got awarded their Technical Assistance Center grant. So those ones aren't established, but regions 2 through 7 and then 9 actually do have technical assistance centers that are already established. So I'd recommend visiting their website, which are all linked here, or giving them a call, or giving them a call to talk through what kind of assistance you might need regarding this proposal or future proposals or anything else that you might be working on. Next slide. Like I mentioned, these are the other technical assistance centers by state. Obviously, Region 8 is still figuring out or getting established because they were recently awarded as well. And we'll share that so you could just kind of link to it after the call. Next slide. Option 3, applying together through one application. So GreenLatinos is exploring this idea of creating one application that everybody can use as a template. And they can insert their own location, their own organization into it. But as you know, getting a whole bunch of folks on the same idea for one grant can be a little bit of a like complicated process. So each organization would still have to find their own partners. We would be strongly encouraging everybody to apply for $20 million, because while you apply for 20 million, you'll probably get 10. So it behooves us to go ahead and apply for more, and then go ahead and have to deal with having to bring down our budget if we were to get the grant. We propose that we would all do the same project related to community solar, heat pumps, and or indoor pollution monitoring, because that'll hit all 6 of those goals within the grant. We'll work towards a submission deadline of mid-March, ideally March 22nd. Each organization would slightly adapt, but not stray too far from the narrative, plan, and budget that we've created, in order to make it easier for everyone, and more of a plug and play type of a scenario. We would think that you would need approximately 1 full-time person to help see this through. And that would be from approximately February through March 22nd. We would be, like I mentioned, we would be applying for 20 million with the hope of getting 10. We would do the same project to increase the likelihood of getting funded based on one really solid application, in order to save time, save resources, and in one application and one oral presentation, right? Because if we were to provide office hours, it's just a lot easier in order to make it standard across the board, right? You're going to have to adapt it slightly to your location and your organization, but in order to make it as easy as possible to help as many people as possible, that's what we're suggesting. We would submit by March 22nd, because the earlier we apply, the greater likelihood our project would get funded. Next slide. How would we prepare for this funding opportunity? Well, we're going to look to find a partner, which we'll have another webinar, I think, on January 31st, to help you find a partner and help walk us through some of the matchmaking opportunities. We'll need to build a coalition, and that's going to be more local. You know, you're going to need probably some local support from locally elected officials to write how great your proposal is and how great your organization is, as well as some other folks that would help us actually eventually implement the project. Because obviously, I think a lot of our CBOs are probably not solar developers or heat pump experts, but we can rely on other types of organizations that would provide that kind of consulting advice. So that's what I mean about creating our coalitions. We'll identify meaningful transformative projects to implement strategies across the 3-year project. We'll go ahead and make sure that community voices are activated within sam.gov and grants.gov. I would recommend, even if your CBO is not going to be the lead applicant, that everyone go ahead and sign up for grants.gov and sam.gov in order to get your cage number and your EIN. That's your those are the 2 numbers, like your EIN, your UEI, and your cage number, in order to make you recognized by the federal government to apply for federal government funding in the future. So while you might not have to have it for this grant application, it behooves us to have it in the future because we all probably want to be primary applicants at some point. And so we'll be looking for these types of partnerships, like I mentioned, a collaboration between 2 CBOs, a partnership between a CBO and one of the following: a federally recognized tribe, a local government, or a higher education institution. Next slide. Applying together, what will it entail? So we're still working on getting this funded, right? So we're in that process of fundraising for this. But we're looking to, GreenLatinos would potentially create one proposal. We'll create a proposal out of Colorado, right? Your organization can use that as a template. You can switch out everything that says GreenLatinos for your organization. You know, make sure that it's like you're providing background on your organization versus GreenLatinos, because your organization probably has different background and whatnot. You would switch out Colorado for your location. We'll probably focus on Denver, but we have to nail that down because you probably can't focus on a whole state. And you can use everything in our application, from the narrative to the budget. We'll have office hours for your organization to ask questions about the narrative, budget, and supporting documents. Next slide. We'll definitely have to apply by location together, unless you're going to be applying through one of those separate farming communities or those HUD zones. So we'll probably be in that matchmaking session. We'll break down by region, probably by state, and maybe even we'll probably break down by state and let folks decide how they're going to break down further within those rooms to help you find your perfect match for this grant. So we're going to have to apply by region, and we're going to have to create a map for each one of your locations, or you're going to have to create a map for each one of your locations that you're going to be operating in, to make sure that you're focusing on a disadvantaged community as defined by the EPA, ideally in one map that's connected. Next slide. Okay, one application project details. The GreenLatinos project will likely include one, if not all, of the following different type of options. So solar development / farm, where we would buy a parcel of land or a solar farm and help make the solar energy more accessible to Latino, low-income, historically disadvantaged communities, especially to those who rent. The solar energy and the solar development projects work on a subscription basis. So we'll charge approximately 10% less than the market rate per kilowatt hour. We'll use that additional, so that's going to be the savings for the consumer for each household. The cool thing about looking at the solar development portion of this is that we can use 10% of any additional savings towards a community-owned and operated fund for future green projects that will be owned and operated by the community. So this will provide you some kind of long-term investment and long-term money that would be sustainable beyond this grant. So it would be ideally in perpetuity of your solar development project and your solar farm. So you would have some play money to work on future green projects for your CBO if we were kind of pursuing more of a solar development or for the solar development portion of the proposal. Heat pumps. Heat pumps will provide partial funding for heat pumps and decrease unmet costs of heat pump tax credits. For example, currently within the federal, currently there are federal tax incentives for buying heat pumps. And also there are state tax credits for buying heat pumps. Ideally, our type of proposal would be to make heat pumps more accessible by decreasing upfront costs. And this would have an immediate impact, whereas solar would be kind of like a longer term impact, and the impact wouldn't be immediate as soon as we bought the farm. We would have to do all the installation and whatnot. So we'd be looking at a 3-year wait to have the impact, where heat pumps would be pretty immediate after installation. And heat pumps can be used for heating or cooling. They take cool air, move them to hot air places within your room, within your house, and then vice versa with cold and hot air. Indoor pollution monitoring provides indoor pollution monitors so that our community can better understand the current state of their pollution within the household and take steps to improve indoor air quality. Next slide. The purpose is obviously it's multifaceted. We understand that a lot of our community currently can't take advantage of solar energy, clean energy, heat pumps, because there's a lot of upfront costs, and a lot of times our community rents. So in comparison to the average household, 65% of the US population lives in homes that they own, whereas 34% rent. In the Latino community, 19% of our community rents, whereas only 10% own a home. So that has made like solar energy and solar clean energy tax incentives and clean energy less accessible to our community. The goal of this project would be to make it more accessible so that our community can have equal access to the economic and environmental benefits of of clean energy, and in a way that they can also monitor and improve the quality of their indoor air and take steps to improve it. We believe that through providing these choices to our residents who typically have limited resources, we can not only improve our climate footprint, but also help low-income renters to have more sustainable buildings and just live in an overall environment that they take more pride in and have more ownership in. Next slide. Community solar development. So this slide basically covers the basics of what community solar is. Community solar helps households benefit from solar energy without installing solar panels on their houses. So this is where it comes in for businesses, for renters, for communities that may not be able to make physical modifications to the households. It allows us to get our community to get 10% cleaner or 10% savings on energy on their electric bills or their energy bills, and have a cleaner input or cleaner footprint on the environment. We can potentially serve hundreds of homes through added battery storage, also provide electricity throughout the night. So it could almost be self-sufficient. The impact can be up to about $400 per year in electricity savings for a household. Next slide. And that's in addition to our fund that we were talking about. What is community solar? So this goes through a little bit more of the subscription process. because in order for our folks to take advantage of community solar, you just can't buy the solar farm. We're also going to have to get our community subscribed to community solar. And so this kind of explains the process where we'll build the project, they'll replace their utility bill with this solar subscription, then we'll go ahead and install the solar systems, use the electricity bills to utilities ensure that electricity is accessed by the subscriber, and subscribers have a monthly fee that's 10% cheaper than they currently have. Next slide. Heat pumps. So heat pumps are when heating and cooling systems that transfer from inside the building to the outdoors and vice versa. Heat pumps use a special type of refrigerant, like in your refrigerator, to cool a home and any kind of a living space. They're really cool because instead of having to heat or cool your whole house, like you might have to do with your normal HVAC system, you can choose to heat or cool just one room of your house, which would also save you some on your electric bill and some of your other electric savings. And over the course of the year, we believe that heat pumps can save an average household about 20 to 40% on their annual heating and cooling bills, which is especially important when you're talking about extreme heat and extreme cold that we're experiencing right now in the United States. And yeah, like I said, there's a lot of tax credits around this, which we could hopefully try to figure out a system where we would use some of this grant to provide that upfront costs so that communities wouldn't have to rely on a reimbursement basis. We believe that the impact can be 93% reduction in climate pollution as related to electricity for the households who use this. And there's a tax credit of approximately $2,000 that's federal. And in addition to that, there's a state tax credit. Next slide. Indoor pollution monitoring. So indoor pollution monitoring is a process of trying to measure the indoor air spaces. So on average, Americans spend about 90% of their time indoors. And like the pollutant levels indoors can be up to 5 times more. There could be up to 5 times more pollutants in your house than outdoors. And most people aren't even aware of this. So these pollution monitors will help us kind of figure out what our current air quality is indoors, and then try to figure out how we can improve that. Like, do we need to open the window? Does it make sense to do X, Y, and Z dust to, for example, improve our air door quality? And it's relatively low cost for folks. So the entry into this market is low cost, about $100 to $300 per unit. The impact would be immediate, and it can lower air quality, or air quality improvements can be below 50%, which is pretty scary. So this will be more of an education, kind of an outreach with our community about what their current pollution standards are indoors and figuring out how they can improve it. And the cool thing is that we use this in conjunction. Folks can see where they're before and what their after is as far as indoor pollution. Before they would have a heat pump and an after, or before they were using solar technology and after. So they could be more in control of their own environment and their own health consequences. Next slide. So this kind of puts a side-by-side comparison between all 3 of these different options. Like I said in the beginning, we can use them in conjunction together. So it doesn't have to be a and or, it doesn't have to be a or, it could be a and or. And so this would be the potential impact, right? You can see that with solar farms, the impact would probably be about 500 to 1,000 homes. Heat pumps about 3,000, and indoor pollution monitoring can get up to 30,000 if we just did those, right? So if that was like standalone. Audience obviously I think that for the most part, when we're looking at disadvantaged communities, we'd be looking at renters. Obviously, there'll be some owners that would be able to qualify. And the benefits with solar farms is that we would own the land and own the actual development, and we would have the community investment fund. The owners for heat pumps, the owners would be the people who own the property versus us. And there is a possibility for a community investment fund there as well. And then the owners of the pollution monitors would be the average person that would be getting these pollution monitors. Some drawbacks include with solar is that the time and permits, it's not going to be an immediate impact, so it's going to take a little bit more time. Heat pumps, there's a high upfront cost that is often mitigated with tax incentives, and that indoor pollution monitors, the accuracy can actually vary greatly between the different types of pollution monitors. So we'll want to make sure that we get one that is good, and like do a lot of research around that. Costs, there's a high overall cost for a solar farm, high individual cost for heat pumps, and it's just overall just a lot cheaper with pollution monitors. The timelines obviously vary. Workforce development and actually creating jobs in the community is something that I also tried to highlight here too, because one of the other impacts of this kind of work would be the jobs that we would be able to create. Next slide. The main benefits could be the community-owned and operated fund, where we would put 10% into solar heat pump savings into a locally managed fund. And we could probably also get some kind of high interest rate on that, which would allow us to have long-term impact in the community beyond this type of a project for other green projects. Jobs that would be created for heat pumps and to a lesser extent solar. Greenhouse gas reduction and improved air quality, and lower energy bills for households related to solar and heat pumps. Next slide. Next slide. Like I mentioned earlier, we're still fundraising against this proposal. So this is our idea and this is our concept, but this is still this is what we're fundraising against. So this is still a work in progress. Upcoming events. Next slide. So an important part of getting this grant is actually being able to monitor and manage it. So we're going to go ahead and on the 24th of January, we're going to talk about getting your financial house in order and getting your back of the house in order. So this will be on the 24th. We're going to be having a panel where we're going to talk about everything you need to know about how to, like what you need to know so you can go into this grant eyes wide open about what the federal government expectations are, because we don't want your CBO to get in and then not have the resources, capacity, or understanding of what it entails. So we're going to use this next session on the 24th to go through some of those basics. Please scan that QR code so you could sign up for that panel now. I think it'll be really informative. And then on the 31st, we're going to have a matchmaking opportunity for this grant. So we'll try to pair up with higher education institutions, other CBOs, and and like potentially tribes and municipalities on figuring out if we could find a match, or giving you some advice about finding your match if that match does not exist currently within our community. Feel free to scan this right now. Next slide. Please go ahead and take our community change grant survey. this is an important part of us trying to figure out who's actually interested in doing one application with us, and figuring out how people would actually, like, just your interest level, like where you're going to be calling, also which region you're from, so we can better do matchmaking. So next slide. And I think we're just in Q&A mode. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the previous slide and then open it up for Q&A, so we can, so folks can still use the survey, but I can answer any questions you might have. Let's see. Does somebody want to come off of like mute and ask me their question?
Yeah, I have a quick question, Joan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rene Jimenez from the San Gabriel Valley Conservation Corps, tuning in from Southern California. I noticed community solar may involve some land acquisition,
Yes.
depending on the partnerships, of course, if a city has something that makes it easier. But in terms of that process, does GreenLatinos have anyone familiar with CEQA or can point us in the right direction?
CEQA is what exactly?
Excuse me, the California Environmental Quality Act. So it's our it's like it's basically an expanded version of I guess the Environmental Quality Act. So it's just a little bit more stringent in terms of environmental standards. So if we're buying land, we have to go through the CEQA process to ensure that we're not impacting habitats, we're not impacting sensitive populations of animal species, all that good stuff.
So I mean, what I would do is, so we're going to be creating this one common application, right? I would go ahead and reach out to somebody who actually specializes in that, and tell them that you're applying and that you'll be applying for this grant, and we would love to consider you as a potential vendor in the future. But you know, it obviously has to be an open process. But if they would support your application, that would be great. And then if they would support your application, maybe you can get some free advice for the application, right? Like ask a question, but have that question be very honed before you reach out. So you're very specific on that. I think that in the application, it might be enough to say that you're preparing to talk with a consultant that would have that CEQA experience and that have that CEQA expertise, because you definitely plan on complying with CEQA and whatnot, versus having it completely planned out right now.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, it's really just like you mentioned, finding those strategic partnerships to know what the projects are going to be, right? So yeah, thank you for that advice, Joan. I appreciate it.
I would use Google. Like, for example, when I did a USDA grant, we're not arborists, right? Within GreenLatinos, we don't have that experience. But I found that anybody that I reached out to was more than happy to provide that kind of free advice to be considered as a vendor in the future.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for this presentation. It was great. I'm just wondering if this recording will be available after the talk today.
Yes, we're going to go ahead and share this deck with everyone. So you can click on all these great links and maybe even look at some of my notes. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Kelly?
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. I'm excited by the ambition of it, but also scared and nervous about that. We were planning on we tried to get an EJCPS related to air quality with a group of partners, and we were turned down for that. So we were initially hoping to recycle it during this tranche of funding, but certainly not at the $10 to $20 million mark. That's a pretty big grant, like that would be humongous for us to ask for. And I'm just really, I have a lot of questions about that and what your thoughts are on how that might work. You proposed 3 different types of projects. Is that all going into this one big application, or are you splitting it out? And then also just a basic question on the air quality. Is it really just to install the monitors, or is it also to include the purifiers?
So we're still working as far as a split out. So let's handle the questions one at a time. So I think like it's and or we're still working on the concept behind the application and the actual proposal. But ideally, we might use like a combination of all 3 because yeah, just doing indoor pollution monitors might be a lot. And we would also be looking to have some kind of filtration or like the the other type of filtration process too with the indoor pollution monitor. So it wouldn't just be a standalone. But yeah, I do agree that $10 million might be high just for indoor pollution monitoring, but in combination with something else or as part of a larger application, I think it could also make sense. But, you know, on the flip side, there could be $10 million worth of $10 to $20 million worth of work, right? So you could try to figure out a map that would make sense for your state or your area where you would maybe engage with like a field firm that would knock on every door and provide person to person like consultation and education about indoor pollution monitors, in addition to having some kind of like general like meetings within the community. So it all depends about how you would do your outreach. I think you could probably do, each CBO can submit 2 applications, right? So you could submit, like if GreenLatinos gets funded for this idea, then you can submit the application that we're essentially creating, and then also reuse your current application that you had applied for previously, but maybe modify it slightly so you can have a bigger impact, and then also apply for at least $10 million, because to be considered for track 1, it has to be $10 to $20 million. And I would always ask for more. I don't ask for less. You get 100% of stuff you don't ask for. Ivana?
Hey. Okay. Hey.
Hello? I think she may have dropped.
So sorry. I think I didn't press mute,
Okay.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ivana. I'm from Trust South LA. I just had a simple question. Will there be a similar application process for track 2, or is GreenLatinos only focusing on track 1 and that's it?
For right now, we're focusing on track 1. If somebody were to give us funding for track 2, we would consider it. It's a lot of effort and a lot of I think we would maybe have to staff up a little bit to consider doing track 2. And generally speaking, my rule of thumb as far as a strategy would be to always apply for the most amount of money available. And that's because you probably get less than what you apply for.
Thank you.
Info Echo Arts, I know you were raising your hand.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I always forget to change it. I'm Marta Kern with Eco Arts Connections, and so our organization hits all 6 of the different goals, which is great, but we are tiny. And I just wanted to echo the one person who said, you know, like $10 million is huge. And I was thinking that this was going to be GreenLatinos applying for the most money possible. I agree with you. That's a very good strategy. But that it was going to be some kind of a re-grant situation. I know. So, for example, Rising Voices in the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Haskell, Indian Nations University got a $10 million grant from the National Science Foundation, but there were all kinds of re-granted projects all over the United States. And that allowed all of the community-based organizations to be really responsive to their particular community needs. Is there any possibility that GreenLatinos would do that? Or you guys have an idea of what you think everybody needs and you're going to go ahead with that? And then wherever we are, we might try to find somebody else to submit a $10 million grant.
So I'll try to tackle that in a few things, in a few ways. One, I don't think that the community change grant allows for regranting, right? Like it's not part of the proposal, it's not part of the NOFO. So I don't think that regranting is a possibility with this grant. So GreenLatinos is not approaching this as far as like, we think that this is what everybody needs, but this might be able to be scaled for the most amount of different people and different organizations and replicated in a way that the most amount of different organizations could maybe apply using our proposal as a template for theirs.
But we
Does
would
that
need to be able to manage $10 million, right? Which, you know,
Yes.
ain't gonna
Yes.
happen. So.
Well, we're gonna go through the next, I would encourage you to maybe go to the next webinar, right? And look at what is needed on the back of the house. During the last presentation, I talked about different opportunities that would be for smaller amount of grants. And that might be something that both you and Kelly might also be interested in. There's this grant maker fund that'll be available, I think around June or like mid this year, like maybe second quarter, third quarter. And that will be for a smaller amount. And it's supposed to be geared towards smaller community-based organizations. So ideally, like that would be, I think, a better opportunity. And they're supposed to take more if you're looking for smaller amounts, right? and not the 10 million type to $20 million grant, because it's also supposed to be geared towards smaller organizations. And hopefully they'll figure out a way to make the compliance a lot easier. But either which way, I would strongly encourage both of you to attend the webinar on the 24th, because there's no way that you could even get a smaller grant and not have to comply with federal government regulations.
Yep.
I think Clayton has his hand raised.
Yeah, absolutely, Joan. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. This has been a fantastic presentation, and thank you for all your expertise and perspective on this. It's much less scary now. I'm Clayton Farrar. I'm CEO for Ideas for Us. We're an environmental action organization based out of Orlando, but we do work all around the world. And I was curious to kind of get some perspective that I'm seeing echoed a lot in the comments here. And it's that our organization, for instance, is in what I would say kind of the mid-range sized nonprofit. We've brought in around anywhere from $1 to $3 million annually each year working on our various projects. Something in the $10 to $20 million range is, of course, beyond what we've have a track record of bringing in before, but we're pretty confident that our back of the house is in order and we would be able to manage something like that quite easily. That said, in choosing a partner, how important is it that we choose a partner that has handled money of that size, or can we choose a partner that may even be smaller than us, that we see the capacity of being able to elevate in the community? How much does that dynamic between the two partners and the size of money they have a track record of managing come into play?
So that's a really good point, and an opportunity for smaller organizations through the partnership to actually be a participant in these grants if they don't actually have the back of the house in order. So I don't think it's as important to have a track record managing these types of grants. You know what I'm saying? It's most important to have your back of the house in order, because you don't want to get in legal trouble just because you're trying to get federal grant dollars and help the community, right? So as long as you have your back of the house in order, I don't think it matters if you've had experience managing $10 million or $1 million, right? it's a lot of the same stuff as long as you can track where the money's going.
Sure. And we should
and then
probably
as
do
far
things
as-
like have an audit in order and things like that ahead of time
Mhm.
coming into this application. So as we're leading up to apply in February or March, right, I would be taking steps right away to, you know, if we hadn't had an audit this past June, I'd be doing that right now, kind of thinking, correct?
So I will let the financial person talk about that next week. I will let her, she's an accountant, she's like a bookkeeper, she's a CFO, right? Amy will go ahead and talk about that. And the other thing I'll say is that if you don't have it in-house now, I think by the time the grant is awarded, you can get your financial house in order, right? You would probably have to hire an outside firm. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? GreenLatinos had to hire an outside firm to make sure everything was in order. So when we're getting that $25 million urban forestry grant, so we could actually accommodate all the federal government regulations and make sure we're dotting all our I's and crossing all our T's. You know what I'm saying? So there's nothing wrong with asking for outside help and hiring outside help. The other thing I would say is, as far as finding a smaller partner, I think that's fine too. You can team with a bigger partner, a smaller partner. I don't think it really matters, right? Like it matters more so about your project concept. If you're partnering with a city, obviously that adds maybe some more gravitas to your application, or the idea that like the city is also on board, but you could also get that through a letter of support. You don't necessarily have to have them be your partner to show that they're supporting your application and your proposal. You could also look at a higher education institution as well. So long and short of it, I don't think it really matters, just as long as your concept works out well and you know what each partner is doing. The lead applicant does have to manage the money. If you're not the lead applicant, you don't have to manage how the money is being spent and the money going out as much, right? You do have to comply with federal government regulations, but you don't have to manage the money. Yes.
Thank you so
Kelly.
much.
You're welcome.
I was curious, how big is GreenLatinos? What's your budget and your staff size?
I have to defer that to somebody else. We keep growing and we're growing at a really large rate.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot since last year. So I don't think I can accurately answer that question. I'm gonna go ahead and like maybe look at a few of these questions in the chat. I think Sean Duquette asked, do you know if urban forestry counts under number 2, the mitigating climate health risk for urban heat islands? I would say probably. It depends on how you're going to be talking about urban forestry. Can the projects be made more flexible? Obviously, I think if you're looking for the one common application that we'll be submitting, you can take what we wrote, use it as a template for yourself and make it for you, right? Make it custom to your organization. You don't necessarily have to do what we're saying, right? We're providing this as an opportunity and a way to make it easier for everybody else. So it doesn't have to be exactly what we write. We'll be able to provide more expertise on what we're writing. So that's the drawback, right? Like I could give you advice on what we're going to be leading, but something we're not leading, I won't be able to provide as much expertise. I could give you like my best thoughts and my best like gut reaction to it, but I won't be able to tell you exactly what that is. And that came from Katia Carranza. Does GreenLatinos have somebody versed in CEQA? I think I answered that question. Well, track 2. Any chance of weatherization to the list of great things you're thinking of. Maybe, I'm not really too sure if we'll do anything on weatherization. It's about also telling the story and making sure that we click all the boxes. So if it helps us tell our story, maybe. But I don't think that's what initially we're thinking of right now, and that came from Marta.
Sorry, Joan, can I just
Yes.
add, I mean, so the folks we work with live at or below the poverty line. And weatherization is probably in mobile homes, which are often forgotten totally and aren't in your list of housing stock. And weatherization is kind of basic ground level, make your home warm enough to live there at all. So heat pumps are a luxury. They're great. Tax benefits are great if you make enough money to pay taxes. So you can
Exactly.
I mean, very seriously, I'd love to talk to you guys about, I mean, the things that you have are more sort of, I don't know if this is true for everybody, but our experience is they're more middle income level folks that you're targeting for the things that you're looking at, and not basic levels. So I'd love to talk, if you guys are interested, about making it more, I don't want to be snarky, but more helpful and meaningful to really poor people. So, and it will make it more sexy and competitive too. Just a thought. And whoever it was who was, go ahead.
I said, we're still working through the process and
Right.
still working through the ideation phase, but I think we're kind of far down the line of solar and heat pumps, or solar and or heat pumps and or individual indoor pollution monitoring, right? So I know indoor pollution monitoring would probably help everybody across the board a little bit more. But yeah, we're still working through some of that. All right. I know that we have gone over, but thank you everyone for joining, and we really appreciate your feedback. If there's any questions that I haven't answered, please feel free to send them our way. And have a great day. Bye.